Good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of ANC 34G, and we meet typically on our scheduled meetings are the second and fourth Mondays of each month. We don't meet in August, however, so our next meeting is not going to be until September 13th. I'm Randy Speck. I'm the chair of the commission. I represent ANC 34G03, and that covers the area basically between Nebraska, Nevada, and Broad Branch. And we'll introduce the other commissioners now. And Lisa, you want to be next?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Gore, and I'm the commissioner for ANC 34G01. And that covers Hawthorne, portions of Barnaby Wood, and pretty much from Oregon Avenue down past Pinehurst to Upland, back over towards Beach, up Oregon Avenue to Western.
John?
I'm the commissioner for District 2. The borders are approximately Oregon Avenue on the east to Utah on the west, Military on the south to a little bit above Wise Road on the north.
And John is joining us from Michigan tonight. And Connie from Iceland.
Right, I'm in Reykjavik right now. I'm Connie Chang. I'm the commissioner for District number 5, and that is east on Connecticut, starting at Legation. So it encompasses the Chevy Chase Community Center and library, and it goes up the circle and it comes down Broad Branch Road, and it hooks a little bit down to Jocelyn between Nevada and Chevy Chase Parkway. It's good to be here.
And Peter.
I'm Peter Goslin. I represent District 6, which runs from 41st Street along the Maryland border on Western Avenue to the beautiful and now, after 20 months operating, Chevy Chase Fountain. From there, the Military, back to 41st with the peninsula to the east along from Kanawha to Legation, bordered by Chevy Chase Parkway.
Okay, we have 5 commissioners tonight, and that constitutes a quorum, so we can conduct business. The 2 absent commissioners, Commissioner Fromboludi and Commissioner Zeldin, are both on vacation, so we'll give them a pass on this one. As we have been for some time, we are operating in a virtual mode tonight. That means the commissioners will all have audio and video throughout the meeting, and we will recognize individuals in the audience for particular items on the agenda as they come up, so that they will then have audio and video as well. And it will help us to do that if you will rename yourself to make sure that your name is accurate on the participants list, so that we will know exactly who you are and can elevate you to be a panelist at the appropriate time. We will try our best to answer all the questions during the meeting. However, we ask you to put your questions in the Q&A function on the Zoom. And if you have comments that you want to make, please put them in the chat, and we'll be saving the Q&A and the chat so that we can look back at that and answer any questions that are left over from that. The meeting, as I indicated at the beginning, is being recorded. And so the video of the meeting will be on our YouTube channel, probably posted tomorrow. Peter does that quite religiously. Okay, so we're ready to begin the meeting with the adoption of agenda. The agenda has been posted on our website and on the various listservs and next door in our neighborhood. And so are there any modifications or changes anyone wants to make to the agenda? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the agenda? 5-0, okay. I have a few announcements. The first is a good thing that's happened after a very, very long time. That's the Chevy Chase Bus Depot. WMATA has finally completed the restoration work on the Chevy Chase Bus Depot. That's located just south of Chevy Chase Circle. This bus depot was one of 3 that was built I think in the late 30s or early 1940s. And it was originally a part of the system for trolleys that ran up and down Connecticut Avenue. The ANC has been advocating for this renovation for quite some time. The buildings are not designated as historic, but they've been treated as historic for the purposes of this restoration. General Manager of WMATA, Paul Wiedefeld, and Councilmember Mary Che, and DDOT Director Everett Lott were all at the walkthrough that we had on July 19th. And WMATA has prepared a video of the new facility. That the link to that will be in our minutes. And information about the history of the bus depot is available at WMATA's website, which will also be linked in our minutes. The ANC, I took advantage of the opportunity to talk to General Manager Wiedefeld about other uses for the bus depot, because we've been advocating for that as well for a long time. It's a space that is underutilized significantly now because it's only available to bus drivers for use of bathroom breaks, basically. So it's really not used as much as it should be in such a prominent spot in our neighborhood. So I emphasize to him again that we hope we can work with WMATA and preserve the historic building, but also do other things with that space that would be useful for the community. The next announcement I have is with regard to grants. Peter?
Just, I wanted to say I was sorry I missed the event. I didn't notice the invitation. I do hope that besides Randy asking about this, asking WMATA about this, that all of us weigh in on this one, because it is a sorely, even in its now improved state, is a sorely underused resource. And if it just remains a turnaround and a bathroom for drivers, it's going to stay that way. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, they have improved the area immediately behind the building so that there's a little plaza there. And they were even suggesting the possibility of using that for pop-up art show or flower show or something like that. So they're thinking about other ways to use it, but I think we've got greater ambitions than that. So, okay, the next item is the with regard to grants. On July 12th, the commission approved a grant of $1,990 to feed the family pantry, and that was for the purchase of a refrigerator and a cooler to store fresh fruits and vegetables to distribute to food insecure people in our ANC. And currently they're supplying food to 15 residents in Regency House. And because there were questions raised by the director of the Office of Advisory Neighborhood Commissions, we asked the Attorney General for an opinion about whether this grant would comply with the statute. And on July 20th, the Attorney General gave us an opinion that because the refrigerator and cooler will be broadly available to needy residents across the community at large will benefit, which would mean that this grant will serve, and the ANC had reason to believe it would serve, a public purpose. So therefore it meets the requirement in the statute. And based on this opinion, we expect and hope that the OANC will approve this grant that we've already, we provided a check to feed the family pantry already. Okay, then with regard to the district's fiscal 2022 budget, on July 20th, the council passed the Budget Support Act for the 2022 budget. And it includes provisions that the ANC had supported. And one of those, for instance, was the further funding of the lead service line replacement program and the creation of an interagency task force to renew DC Water's plan for removing all lead service lines by 2030. We'll have a link to the Budget Support Act in our minutes as well. The budget also includes funds to implement the Committee on Facilities and Operations recommendation that the OANC develop a strategic plan, which is something that we advocated as well. A student at Georgetown University, Ali Chu, has asked that we announce a survey that she is conducting on the district residents' opinions of the COVID-19 vaccine. And the survey, which is limited to district residents, is open until the end of August, and we'll have a link to that in our minutes as well. And finally, the annual 2nd District Metropolitan Police Department's Citizen Advisory Council will be holding its annual awards banquet on September 29th from 6:30 to 10. at Maggiano's Restaurant. That's 5333 Wisconsin Avenue. And this banquet has been held for a number of years to honor the officers and civilian employees whose performance has been extraordinary over the last year. And we didn't have it last year because of the pandemic, but they're resuming it again this year. You can support the banquet by paying for an officer's ticket, which is $50 each, or by attending, and which the tickets are also $50 each. And there are various other ways to support this event, and you may call or email Samantha Nolan at nolantutor@gmail.com for tickets and additional information. Okay, other commissioners have announcements that they'd like to make? Peter.
I just, this is an internal matter, but I encourage all commissioners when they make announcements to subsequently, or as Randy does in advance, send me the text. I'm trying to lighten my load on minutes, and that would help an immense amount. And the same goes for members of the community. I see Amir is on. There may be others who regularly make announcements during our meeting. It would help me immensely if you would send me text. Thank you.
Okay, any other commissioner announcements? All right, any community announcements? Anyone in the community, if you raise your hand, we'll recognize you to make announcements. Amir, we'll recognize you.
Randy, did you make me host?
I did. Are you not able? Yes, you're listed here as co-host. Is it not working?
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Am I being
Good
heard?
evening.
All right. My apologies, first of all, for not being here at the last meeting 2 weeks ago. So I want to give a bit longer of a presentation this time. I do want to start with a few specific infrastructure concerns that we have, as Commissioner Jocelyn mentioned. One of them being the Military Road Chevy Chase Parkway intersection that we've been talking about. I do want to advise that we've been working to escalate these up the mayor's office chain of command. And we're trying to work with our new DDOT representatives because both Ward 3 and 4 do have new DDOT representatives. So we're trying to make sure that everyone is up to speed on that. But I have made the city aware of the existence of the previous 2018 traffic study report. So they are taking that into consideration. Moving on to more general updates, DC is about to hit 70% of its entire population as vaccinated with at least one dose of the vaccine. And we're maintaining walk-up vaccination sites east of the river, such as Anacostia High School, where they're giving out $51 gift cards to newly vaccinated DC residents, as well as already vaccinated residents who accompany them as a vaccine buddy. Pertaining to those in Ward 4, Mayor Bowser has been happy and proud to celebrate the opening of the Todd A. Lee Senior Residences on Kennedy Street. It's a 38-unit all-affordable senior community, and all units are affordable to residents 55 and up who make no more than 50% of the area median income. And we also want to make sure that everyone's aware of the Stay DC program. What that is, it's a rental assistance program open to renters who are struggling to pay rent, which is considered a rent burden of 50% or more of income every month, who have lost work or incurred costs due to COVID-19, or earn below a certain threshold that depends on family size, and you can ask me for more specifics. And this program covers 18 months of rental assistance and utilities, either backwards, retroactively, or 3 months ahead at a time. And so if you know anyone who meets the criteria, please spread awareness, as the funding for this is gonna get depleted in September. And a couple more small.
I have a question for you on Stay DC.
Yep.
Has the city done anything to improve that application process?
I'm not sure if there's been anything done specifically, but I have spoken to some residents, and they've been having their applications go through more smoother than it has in the previous months. So checks are being mailed. There was supposedly a delay in the postal service regarding that. So I'm not sure if anything groundbreaking has been done specifically, but I do know it's working better from talking to constituents than it has in the past.
Okay.
And a couple more small updates. Following a recent string of violent crime in DC, Mayor Bowser has stated that she would direct MPD to use overtime and increase bicycle patrol officers. DMV is also now fully functional and open for walk-ins as of last week. Please make sure to look up exactly what you need before going and whether or not you can skip the trip by getting what you need done online, as the lines are going to be long. And finally, streeteries will be allowed to operate until February 28th of next year. And if anyone has any more questions, please direct them in the chat Q&A function or to my contact information. Thank you.
Peter?
I'd just like to piggyback on Amir's first announcement. Randy and I will be meeting with Derek Voigt, I don't know his title, of DDOT at the intersection at Military and Chevy Chase Parkway tomorrow at 3 p.m. And other commissioners or any member of the public who has a concern about this dangerous intersection is welcome to join us.
When I
Yeah, I think
spoke,
I'll
I did speak with Director Lott when we were at the bus depot and asked him about that, whether he would attend. He was intending to attend as well, so he may well be there.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can email me, I'll go too. Thanks.
You want an email from me about time and place?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'd like to attend.
Yep, good. We'll do.
Hey, John?
Obviously, I can't go, but just a thought, is there anything they could do in the interim, like with those orange and white barrels with lights on top or something, just to slow down the traffic or make people be a little bit more cautious?
John, I think we will make some suggestions in that regard. I think that there are some steps that just could be taken right away that would make it a whole lot safer, and would show residents, the immediate surrounding neighbors, that the city's on the case. So we'll suggest it. Thanks.
Honey?
Like John, I'm unable to join you two and others, but please, I think with students starting school pretty soon, very soon, within a month, something has to happen. If they can't break down cement and create new curbs and all of that, they've got to do something so that the signage is better, because fender benders are one thing. But if a child is crossing that street, it is very dangerous. And if there's any way that Derek can walk over to Legation in Connecticut, that intersection is really no good. I really do know about 3 people one who got hit and 2 others who've avoided getting hit, including myself. So if there's any way, students do go from our neighborhood to Deal and Wilson. And just crossing that is difficult because as a car tries to cross from east to west, if there's any cars parked along Connecticut, it's hard to see. You're inching out and you're looking. And so any pedestrians that are crossing cross Legation along Connecticut, it's dangerous. And from any either side of Connecticut across from east to west is dangerous. So we need to do something about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amir.
Thank you.
For those who are in Michigan or Reykjavik, we're having a storm right now, so you're missing the storm. Okay, Matthew.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, y'all. Speaking of the storm, it is hailing in Petworth. I don't know if there's literal hail on your side, but it is hailing over here, which is wild. Well, it's nice to be with y'all. My name is Matthew Landrew. I work in constituent services for Council Member Janice Lewis-George in Ward 4. For those joining tonight, I'll drop my contact information in the chat. And for anybody joining by phone, I'll read my phone number, or I'll say my phone number aloud at the end of my comments so that you can get in touch with me if you need me. Yeah, not much for me tonight. I mean, as I'm sure you all know, we're steeped in the kind of last few weeks of budget season. The final votes on the budget will be made next Tuesday on the 3rd and then on the 10th. These are going to bring a number of opportunities for the council member to push for, fight for, vote on resources, additional kind of budget and funding for things that matter to Ward 4 residents. And so we hope to hear from you in these final couple weeks if you have thoughts. If you have questions about what's already happened in the budget, there's a few things I'd recommend. One, I think the council members planning on coming around to all the advisory neighborhood commissions after budget season. I know for those who won't have a meeting in August, we'll make a point to get her scheduled to be here in September, just to talk about the budget process and the things that were really high takeaways as she just navigated her first budget season. A few just kind of highlights about things that may matter to you. A few things that came out of last week's vote. There's a few things I'd like to highlight. One was there's an increase of about $1 million in funding for improvements to the Petworth Library, as well as the full funding of what's called the Department of Buildings Act that will functionally, over the last couple of years, I think it was voted on a year or two ago, but was waiting on funding. That will basically break DCRA up into two smaller agencies, one specifically devoted to enforcing issues related to construction in the District of Columbia, which we hope will ultimately protect tenants and homeowners and allow us to take quicker and more effective action on vacant and blighted properties as a district. The other thing is that last week was voted on an increase in income taxes affecting residents making more than $250,000 a year. The revenue generated from those taxes are going to be reinvested in ending homelessness, providing child care, and increasing wages for child care workers. We want to talk with you about that if you're interested. I'd love to connect you with our legislative team if you have questions about that or how it might affect you or how we came to that decision. We're also happy to hear from you in the next couple of weeks if you have concerns about that.
Matthew, one question about that before you go on. Are those funds that are being collected as a result of the higher tax for those in higher income brackets, is that going to be earmarked for those purposes? Can it be shifted to other purposes? I'm just concerned that it's going to get raided. The funds may be raided and used for things that the council probably didn't intend.
Yeah, great feedback. I think as far as I understood the legislation as it looks now, is that money is specifically earmarked for those explicit purposes. But if you have additional concerns, I'm happy to connect you with our legislative director to talk through how we can ensure that there are protections around that money specifically for those purposes, by way of follow-up. Thank you for that question.
Peter, you have something on the same topic?
Either Matthew or Amir or you, Randy. We've had correspondence with Councilmember Che's office about monies for the small area plan, if necessary, to extend into the new fiscal year. Those communications have been sort of inconclusive. I mean, we each stated how we thought this was what we remembered about prior meetings about this issue. Do any of you know anything about whether there is money in the 22 budget for the possibility of further forums and information exchanges and other events that would make this a more robust small area planning process here in Chevy Chase?
I don't off the top of my head. It's certainly something I can look further into. I also think I saw on the agenda, as part of the agenda tonight, to talk with the Office of Planning a bit about this, and it's possible that we can talk a bit with them about it.
Yeah, I think
but
that's
I appreciate
really
something the council is best suited to answer.
That's probably something for Erkins to answer. Okay, we interrupted you, Matthew. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thanks for the questions. Just a few other things. I think top of mind for a lot of us right now is public safety. There just continue to be really horrifying incidences of violence in the neighborhoods that we all live in and work in and walk our kids in and our dogs. And we need meaningful solutions to it. We need it in a way that's really holistic and thoughtful and honors the humanity of people while also understanding what accountability actually looks like. And I think we all need to be in on this conversation. There was another homicide today in Ward 4 at 7th and Jefferson that was a result, it seems, of domestic violence. Another topic that we don't discuss in public nearly enough, and one that we really need to have more meaningful, more nuanced, more sensitive conversations around. All that to say, I think the next at least opportunity with the council to talk about public safety and gun violence and other types of violence is coming up on Thursday at 9:30. The Council Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety will have a roundtable to discuss kind of increased violence in the district. A number of the leaders in the city who are focusing on that will be there. It's going to be a government witnesses only hearing, but they're encouraging public testimony in writing. And I'll drop in the chat where you can submit that, but it's just to the following email address: judiciary@dccouncil.us. We as an office are doing what we can, fighting for funding to really get at the root causes and systemic issues. We're also kind of canvassing and walking Kennedy Street and other areas that are hotspots for violence on a daily basis. We're having a job fair on August 12th on Kennedy Street from 3 to 7 p.m. The Building Blocks program, which you may have heard of, did something similar. And they're going to kind of help us craft that for Ward 4 specifically. So that's coming up in a couple weeks, and we'll send around a flyer to all the commissioners. So, you know, I'll end there on public safety. The last thing I'll just say is always, if you're having any issues with city services in your neighborhood and you need support, our office is here to help. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to elevate or escalate situations so that we can get issues resolved. So I'm always here for that, and I'll drop my info in the chat. But for anybody on the phone, I'll tell you my phone number now. You can reach me at 202-286-6311. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, Lisa?
Yeah, Matt, can you give us, well, a couple things. First, definitely thank the council member for her approach on the public safety issue. I think is definitely well thought out in terms of accountability and resources for long neglected neighborhoods. And I think that is really crucial. But do you have any update on the Building Blocks program, and has it expanded for Ward 4? Is it sufficient? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, it hasn't expanded. A few things about that. The Building Blocks program has said for a while now, at least for 2 or 3 months, that the intention will never be to public the entirety of what the program will look like. For example, they're saying, we don't want to promulgate that X, Y, or Z street is going to be a building block. Part of the theory of that being, we're worried about the impacts of people's awareness that they're part of a program that will drive people's behaviors in a different way. It's almost like they're kind of doing an experiment in a way, trying to figure out what's the impact of this going to be and how can we control for X, Y, and Z variables. And I suppose I can understand that. All that said, we did find out, what is it, Monday? I think we found it on Thursday or Friday of last week that Kennedy Street, both at the corner of 5th and the corner of 7th, are not currently slated to be part of the Building Blocks program. And that's being driven by specific data that the district's been collecting that's driving what they've identified as the top 151 blocks. Our office is asking for more details about what that data is, where it comes from, and advocating for if Building Blocks is not going to come to Kennedy Street or a few of the other really ongoing hotspots for violence in the district, then what else we can be doing as neighbors, but also as a district government with a lot of money and resources to support people in ways that are transformative.
Could Matt or Commissioner Gore just briefly describe what the Building Blocks program is?
Matt could probably describe it better, but it's basically resources to designated areas that are maybe, you know, prone to violence.
To the police or to whom?
Police. MPD.
MPD.
Matt, you want
Yeah,
to
so it's,
explain a little bit more thoroughly?
yeah, I'm happy to. The theory here is that addressing violence is going to require a really integrated approach, and that we need to add to what law enforcement is already doing by trying to understand all the other things that contribute to crime. Why does an individual resort to crime? And I think public health analysts have developed theories of change that are being employed by policymakers. And in this case, it specifically means that if we can understand that housing insecurity contributes to crime, or that poverty contributes to crime, or that hunger contributes to crime, then we can solve those problems and reduce the likelihood of crime in certain neighborhoods. And so I think the concept of building blocks was to take what are disparate agencies working in silos and really focus them on specific areas that have really high incidence of crime, specifically measured by gun violence, and really push resources to them. And so that might manifest in different ways depending on the block, but you can imagine, multiple job fairs every weekend to really identify all the folks who need jobs. You can think about folks who have historically only been able to rent, having more access to buying homes in their neighborhoods through housing programs, right? You can think about mental health and substance abuse programs really being kind of flooded into streets, and making sure that behavioral health workers are out walking around more often, and that these things collectively.
So I understand that this is not straight out more resources to MPD. This is basically trying to
Community-based.
deconstruct what was behind violence at a particular place, and what resources could be brought, non-law enforcement resources could be brought to do something about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
So, Matthew? So Matthew, you're saying that Mayor Bowser has the 150 blocks, and if Kennedy Street isn't included, then it can be added to it. Is that it? So there's an opportunity to add to some of these streets or some of these blocks if the community believes that there's a rise in violence?
Yeah, my understanding has never been that the district's intending to choose 151 blocks and say sorry to the rest of you. I think the idea of this program was to launch with a specific target and to see if it really works. And I think why they identified 151 as opposed to 125, I don't know that maybe it was slightly arbitrary, but the director of that program could speak to it more effectively. They've articulated since the launch of this idea that this is a starting point, that the concept is to invest resources in a particular area to attempt to stabilize the crime rates, and then keep resources flowing to go at the root causes. And that'll mean that if Ward 7 and 8 have, 95 of the 151 initial blocks, and that they see some progress in that then they might open up additional blocks in the program and continue to push that funding. At a base level, what they're talking about with this program feels like something that's good for all of us, right? That every block needs, regardless of the crime metrics at the moment. And so you'd hope that becomes a theory of how we operate as communities, that all of us need consistent wraparound supports and services. And I think it's just a matter of resources and focus.
That was going to be my comment, Matt. I mean, if anybody knows Kennedy Street, we know that it's always, had issues, but it seems like the 151 blocks kind of piggyback, and I don't know if this is the case, but kind of piggyback on the blocks designated as the most violent. I think there are roughly 151 blocks, or a certain percentage of the district, where those numbers seem to be really, really high in terms of gun violence. And it seems to be matching with that 151 on building blocks. But my point is kind of what you're saying, and this is just Lisa's point. I would hope at some point that the city does broaden its definition of which blocks can get into this program. You do not want to be the block that eventually gets there. You want to be the block that doesn't get there. So resources in the beginning, prior to, making the top, list of gun violence in the city. We don't want our blocks to get there. So, there's a lot to say on that social, science approach. You're approaching it at the back end? Or are you approaching it at the front end? And what does the data look like, on both sides to see where you should actually start this program at? And I don't think starting it on the back end is a bad thing, but I think we also, as a city, have to really look at, those spots that need what we would call, I guess, early intervention, as opposed to late intervention, and focus on that as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you see the federal government pushing pretty hard on that. The district's like doing it as well. So I think you're absolutely right that focusing on early intervention, talking like early child care intervention. And that's part of why I'm excited to see a lot of the resources from the income tax devoted to that. Just one cap on that, and I'm sure some of you may have other questions, but I will say that some of your questions and thoughts are really important to the council member as we go into Thursday's hearing. If you have specific things that you think we really need to highlight this about this program, right? The Building Blocks program or whatever else is happening in the district, be it law enforcement or otherwise. We'd love to get your feedback before Thursday so the council member can lift it up during her Q&A because we can take up some rounds and go around and around and really push on questions. So please reach out to us by email.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
Nice to be with you.
All right, we'll move to the substantive part of the agenda now. Just for anyone who's interested, we have 21 attendees tonight. The first item on the agenda is discussion and possible vote on a special exception application at 3706 Jocelyn Street to construct a two-story rear addition. And Lisa, if you could elevate Gio Polani, I think is how it's pronounced, and Tehan Sher. And this house is located in Chris Romboluti's SMD, but because Chris is not here, I volunteered to shepherd this through. And I have been to the site and met Gio and have an idea of what their plans are. So Gio, you and Tehan want to describe what it is you're planning to do and what you're asking the BZA, the Board of Zoning Adjustments, to approve as a special exception?
Yeah, yes, I can start, Gio, and then you go. Okay. My name is Tehani Sher. I'm from Landis Architects Builders, and I'm here with Giordano Poloni, the owner of the property at 3706 Jocelyn Street Northwest. We are here to present a project that it is a two-story addition at the rear that requires special exception from the Board of Zoning Adjustment, the BZA. So let me, can I please share my screen? I think you need, yes, okay, here we are. Okay.
Yeah, should be able to.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the subject property at 3706 Jocelyn Street as seen from the front. It's an end unit triplex, so 3 semi-detached dwellings. This is the end unit. And this is as seen from the front. At the back, there is an existing one-story addition here. And there's also at the back, in the backyard, an existing garage that has a deck on top. And this is the addition I'm talking about here, as seen from the roof deck. Now to explain the addition, so here are 2 site plans. This is the existing, and this is the proposed on the right. So the existing shows that this is the subject property, the existing one-story addition here, and the garage with the roof deck on top. The proposed project proposes to remove the garage and remove the first-story addition and build 2-story addition with a basement at the back. Now with this addition, we are asking for a special exception from lot occupancy and from rear setback for the addition being more than 10 feet past the adjacent property rear wall. So let me go back a little bit here and explain and show you some zoning information. So the property is in R2. The minimum lot, the lot area, the existing lot area of this lot is 1851, whereas the minimum lot area in R2 is 3,000. So as you can see, this is a relatively small lot compared to other lots in general in R2. The existing lot coverage with the garage and the first-story addition that I showed you is at 48%. With the removal of those and the addition of the 2-story addition, we are at 47%, so a little bit less than what we currently have. So as you can see, the reason for why we are over lot coverage is the size of the lot. It is smaller than the usual, and it's also the odd shape of the lot. As you can see, this corner here at the back left side is cut, and it's part of the rear yard of the adjacent property. So that makes the lot odd in shape and small in size. That's the increase from lot coverage. And then the addition of the 14 feet leaves the required rear setback of 20 feet in R2. So we are in compliance with the rear setback, compliance with the side, but it's over lot coverage by 7%, and it's 4 feet past the allowed 10-foot adjacent rear property wall. We believe that this addition meets the requirements for special exception. There's not going to be any adverse effect on the light, air, and privacy of the adjacent property. There's not going to be any windows on the side wall, and even the rear setback here. And there's going to be fences that already exist and that will continue to exist to separate the 2 yards. Actually, the privacy is much more improved now with the removal of the garage and the roof deck on this side, and just being an open rear yard at this side. The addition, we're showing here plans, and it shows it's really a modest addition, a small addition, 1 room in the basement, 1 multi-purpose room on the first floor, and then a master bedroom, small master bedroom with a small bathroom on the second floor. This is the side and the rear addition. And this is showing 3D views of how the addition is going to look like. And with this, the homeowners reached out to their neighbors and community, and have currently 10 letters of support from their neighbors. And I will let Giordano now talk a little bit and explain his community outreach efforts. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the addition at the end. So Giordano, do you want to?
So first of all, thanks for inviting us to share this, and also for talking about much heavier issues for a while beforehand. It was very interesting and made me feel a little bit less anxious about sharing this proposed construction project after talking about affordable housing and food insecurity and other things like that. So my name is Giordano Palloni, or Gio is what most people call me, and I've lived here with my wife and 2 kids since 2015. And the main motivation for the proposed addition is that we'd like to kind of grow in the house. And with 2 kids, we're kind of running out of space in our youngest bedroom. So he currently has a crib with 1 side taken off, but we'd like to be able to fit a full-size bed in his room so that he's not, head to toe touching both walls as he gets older. So the main purpose is so that bedroom gets bigger, and then also so that we can have grandparents coming to visit and staying in the basement bedroom. So as a part of this, Landis has pushed us to kind of reach out to neighbors, and we sent out letters to neighbors around us with the plans for the addition. And I know the city also sent out letters to all the adjacent neighbors and nearby neighbors with the plans for the addition. We have, as Tahani said, we had 10 neighbors say that they would support it, and 2 or 3 more said that they would be happy to support it, but we told them not to send letters because the application date had already passed at that point. Our adjacent wall neighbors have not given us a letter of support. And they raised a series of concerns related to privacy and the effect on their property. And we had kind of like a Zoom call with them to listen to their concerns. We responded to their concerns, at which point they let us know that they were planning on selling the house. And so they don't feel, they told us that they didn't feel comfortable taking a decision about whether to support the project because they feel like it should be up to the next owners. Since then, Randy made me aware of 1 additional neighbor who has come out in opposition to the project. And I believe that's largely around issues related to light in the adjacent property and the potential for kind of damage. So similar issues that our shared wall neighbors had, potential for damage to the adjacent property. Although we think that with Landis, we've come up with a plan that kind of minimizes all of those issues. And in the end, there should be kind of enhanced privacy. There should be enhanced light in the neighboring yard. And we're also going to take all the care necessary to make sure that there's no damage to our property or any properties around us, because we very much value the welfare of our neighbors. So I think that's it from my side, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, do any commissioners have questions that they want to ask?
Gio, I have a question.
Go ahead, Lisa.
When you say damage to, so I want to ask you a little bit about the opposition. So with their concern in terms of, initially said, I guess the adjacent neighbor who is going to sell was concerned about the effect that it would have on their property. Is that effect particularly property damage during, is that what they're concerned about, damage to that property during a construction phase?
I think it was,
I don't believe so. I think, and I was with in the Zoom meeting with Giordano and the neighbors. They were more concerned about noise and disturbance during construction.
Okay.
And that's really what we addressed. We tried to walk them through the stages of construction from demo. I mean, obviously the demo of the garage will cause a little bit of disturbance at the beginning, but it's a very limited amount of time. Yeah, it's in 1 week, that garage can be taken out, and we're going to give them a notice before we do anything in that regard. As far as structural, I actually wanted, so these drawings are schematic just for the design. When we get to the point we want to submit for a permit, as you well know, DCRA has a very strict review process to the permit. So there's going to be an engineer who is going to exactly come and, specify the footings and the foundation walls. And those are actually special type of foundations. We call them L footings. So they don't go into the neighboring property at all. So no building will go on the neighboring property. During construction, there's going to be a little bit of may require some access just to do some siding, just to do some roof, waterproofing, and we will ask for permission before we are on their property, obviously. So those were the kind. It's most to answer your questions in short. It was disturbance during construction.
Okay. And in terms of the lighting question, were they concerned about light coming onto their property?
Yeah, so this is interesting because actually their yard's actually gonna get more light because the garage is gonna be going and they will get more privacy. But the other thing that we submitted, I thought that you could see it also on the, so this is a shadow study of how the addition is affecting the neighboring property. And as you can see, because all of them, so this is the north side. So all properties on this side are facing south. So as the sun starts going from the east, going all around, this addition is not affecting the neighbor at all. So all around is the sun gonna go and be, by the time it's actually maybe at 2 or 3, when the sun is already down, there's gonna be some shadow casted on this, but it's really at the time when the sun is already down, and that's the only effect that will happen. This is a study that we provided the BZA, and this shows exactly what's happening at each hour of the day and how is that. I mean, we're lucky that they're all facing south. So all of them will get the right exposure of sun throughout most of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just could I follow up?
Yes, Peter.
Just following up on that question, and if you could go back to that previous slide. I mean, the sun doesn't set at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right. I mean, it's minimum shadow. Now, of course, I was talking about the most is at 5 when it's already, that's the most, but at 2, it's partial shadow.
Okay, and can I also understand, is this a duplex or a triplex? And if it's a triplex,
So there is
the third?
another property here, correct? But that's far away from the addition, yeah.
I see.
This is the end unit. The subject property is an end unit. It's rotated because of the north side now. I think that's why the confusion is. So when we show the sun study, the north has to be up. So the whole block is sort of rotated so we can show how the sun is moving. But this is the subject property.
Just so we see it, could you show me when, at evening, 5, 6, 7?
Yes. So this is at 3. And the most I did was actually at 5 when the sun is, let me go to the first one. This is at 5 when the sun is right here. So obviously at 5, it will cast the most shadow. This is the 5, but this is the 3.
but it's also worth pointing out that the garage here is not in these drawings, and the garage is already casting a shadow over most of that yard.
That's
The
what I was going to ask.
And
Seems
it's gone now, yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like it's more light with that garage gone.
Yeah.
Right.
And more privacy too with the garage gone.
Right.
I have a question.
Yes, John?
Yeah, the letter that we saw, as you mentioned, was concerned about the foundation work. Have you shared the information you just told us with your neighbor?
So I did respond to the email, and I should say that Tahani hasn't actually seen that bit yet. So she was responding to the like shared wall neighbors concerns where we had kind of a Zoom call with them. The email that we got today from, which was actual opposition from a different neighbor, was more about structural concerns. And so the concern there was potential structural damage to the neighboring property, which is something that we obviously take super seriously. But as Tahani said already, like we're not going to be doing construction that is actually adjacent to the existing property of the neighbor. So I don't imagine that would be the case. But again, that was part of the reason why we went with Landis Construction, because they had a good reputation and they'd done a similar project for a house up the block. And we'd heard good reports from kind of their adjacent neighbors about how the process was done.
Second question, will you be parking on the street, or will you still have some room behind your new addition to park a car? Or
So
what are you going to do about that?
So the garage isn't actually a functional garage. It's already been, like when we bought the house, it had already been kind of converted into a garage, but really storage space. So we can actually open the door from the alley even to get in there. So we're already street parking. So it won't change kind of our parking or driving, anything like that.
Any other questions?
I have a question about the adjacent property. What exists on that side? On this chart, is it a window? Is it their kitchen? What is facing that backyard for the neighbor?
This existing side addition, yeah. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So the neighbor's property, what are there windows on that? It's also a triplex, that that property.
So with the per zoning and actually building codes, reasons, nobody can put a window on a site on a property line. So even this existing property, there is no window facing the rear yard of the neighbor. Let me show you. So it doesn't show from that. So you're talking about this side?
Yeah, I'm actually asking about the neighbor themselves. So I see 3 windows on their side there. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. All right. So you're going to build 4 feet out from this structure that we see to accommodate the kid's bedroom, as Gio was saying, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the moment, that window, the 3 windows, they can't see out anyway past it as it is. Not too much. They're just looking straight ahead.
Correct. All the backyard, as you see, actually they have more backyard overlooking here than the subject property, because they have all of this backyard.
Yeah.
But they have, yes, this exposure basically.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
I have a comment. I understand that Landis is a very good firm, and I don't doubt that you will take due care with the foundation work. The objectors' concerns are reasonably founded. The buildings at 5301 and 03 Connecticut did indeed basically put facts on the grounds that the developers had promised not to put on the ground, which is they damaged the foundations of an adjacent building and have ended up having to buy it actually at what sounds like a fire sale. So that I just point out to Landis, particularly not to the owner, that the person raising these objections about foundation work and maybe damaging adjacent structures, it's not just paranoia. She's got history to cite on that one. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think so. 2 things I want to say here. First of all, approving one thing on a property doesn't mean that the BZA will approve other cases in other areas. It's a case by case. And I believe the case here is that the addition is going to be all of it outside the parameter of any foundation wall or footings of the adjacent property. Add to that, again, I go back to DCRA because I've been working in the city for a long time. They have a very strict review process, and there's going to be like an engineered seal on all the construction drawings when we submit for a permit, saying that this is safe and that's how things should be done. So a lot of experience and a lot of science and knowledge that goes into preparing these drawings, and we are aware that working in the city, and that's most of our work, 80%, requires just a lot of work, a lot of attention to the details, and being careful to the safety of the properties. And we will take pictures of the engineer actually goes on the first visit and visits both properties. He even takes pictures of the inside of the existing houses. We document all of this work, and we keep an eye on whatever is happening, whether it's due to construction or anything else happening, and fix any issues. Our responsibility to build for our clients a good, but also take care of our neighbors and not cause any damage to them. And there is a process in the city to take care of that too.
Yeah, let me just make clear too that the BZA process is different from the DCRA process. The BZA process is only looking at whether there should be an exception to the zoning for this purpose, not whether there's some possibility in the future that there may be bad construction and that it could cause damage. That's DCRA's responsibility. But for our purposes, for this vote, it is to see whether we support or whether we do have no objections to the special exception for the two special exceptions that they're seeking in this instance. And those two special exceptions are, to make it clear, the lot coverage, which will be 47%, although it's already 48%, only 40% is allowed without a special exception. And the other would be the 4 feet in addition to the 10 feet that it can go back beyond the adjacent property's wall. So it's just those two exceptions. That's what we're looking at tonight. Okay, any questions or comments from anyone attending? If you raise your hand, if you would like to speak.
I have one hand.
Okay, Michelle.
Michelle, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just a couple of comments. One, the argument about things will be better once the garage is gone. This garage is off to the side here. It's not directly impacting the house. And also the addition is going to be 2 stories. I mean, I don't see any way that is not going to affect their light and their views, from their upstairs and their downstairs. So it will be different from what's there now, which is just 1 story. And building it out another, however many feet, 6 feet, 4 feet, that is a sense of, you walk out your back door and what you see for 14 feet is a 2-story brick, whatever it's made of, brick wall. I, as a homeowner, would not like that one bit. And even though, yes, if you go further out, the garage is gone, but there's this sense of what's, when you leave your house, you want to have some openness and you want to have some light too coming into your house. And it just seems to me a 2-story addition of this size will seriously affect that. And getting rid of the existing garage, there is value if you're out in your yard looking around, but it doesn't affect what's happening at the house in terms of the views. The other comment I would like to make, I do know of a neighbor, not in the adjacent houses, but 1 or 2 houses up, who apparently initially gave her approval. I don't know if she sent a letter. She, at the very least, said she was okay with it. But then she too is in a triplex. And one of her neighbors then said, well, heck, maybe I'll do it too. And now she doesn't want this because she doesn't want it happening next to her. And she was going to write an email to the ANC, at least to Randy, I'm not sure if she did or not, and to Chris, but Chris obviously isn't here. I don't know if she actually did, but she said she would. So I know she has concerns. I'm also curious with the adjacent neighbor, if they are now selling their house, are they selling it because of this? I do know of people who have done this when the house next door gets sold to developers. They're like, okay, we're getting out now. But regardless, would it be fair for the new owners for you to wait until the new owners come in? Because they're now, well, anyway, I would not want this happening next to me. And this idea of the city with strict review, yeah, I can tell you DCRA, we've had experience with 5301, 5303 Connecticut. DCRA is basically a joke when it comes to things like that. So I wouldn't count on that protecting people. But I will say Landis is a very reputable company. So I'm sure they will do a better job than the people at 5301, 5303, but it's still a concern and it's not a fun thing to live near. So again, and I do worry once something like this gets approved, more people will do it. And I know at least some of us don't want it happening near us. So those are my views.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And could we get back to the shot of all the commissioners? Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you very much, Gio and Tahani, for the presentation. I will make a motion, first of all, that the commission does not object to the application for the special exception at the BZA, and that Commissioner Frombaluti and I would be the ones to represent the commission at the BZA hearing, if there's a hearing. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, any discussion among the commissioners? Okay, I have just one comment, and that is that BZA applications are all sort of sui generis. They're all considered individually. This will not be a precedent for other applications in the nearby vicinity. Each one will be judged on its individual merits. And with regard to the Gio, maybe you can explain this too. My understanding was that the owners of the property next to you had already made the decision. They're not resident there. They live in Florida, and that they had already made the decision that they were going to sell. Is that correct?
So I can't actually say when they made the decision to sell the property, but they've been in Florida for 2 years, and they indicated to us that they had no plan to move back. So it's entirely possible they would have continued renting it for a while. But I think given where the market is right now, that it was going to be something that they were going to do in the short-term future. But I don't know that with certainty. You'd have to ask them.
Okay. All right. Is anyone else have any comments? I would suggest that we vote then. All those in favor of the motion? 5-0. Okay. Thank you, Gio and Tahani. And Michelle, we thank you for your comments as well. And let us know if you hear when the BZA hearing is going to be, and either Chris or I will plan to be there.
Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next and major item on our agenda is with regard to the small area plan process. And we typically have a report from Connie and from Peter about the process, but we've got some other attendees tonight who are going to make some presentations for us. And so Lisa, if you could elevate Alex and Erkin to panelists as well. And then Peter and Connie, you want to handle this part of the meeting?
Sure. I think Alex is going to go first. Is that correct, Alex? Do you have a presentation?
I do,
Okay.
yes. If I could, I have the ability to share my screen, and I see Erkin's also connecting now.
Let me make you a co-host then, okay?
Right.
And I will.
And so,
I'll make Erkin as well.
And so, just as introduction, Alex will give us a report on the retail market survey. or retail market survey that's been conducted for the Main Street. And then Erkin will give us an update on the visioning survey that's been carried out and then plans going forward. So I hope that people will stick with us as these two presentations are made, because it's very important to our community. And Peter, go ahead.
I'd just like to set two issues before the commission as you listen to these reports. We found ourselves in the spring through June encouraging OP to do a more collaborative, more fulsome engagement with the community. I am concerned as we come into the fall that we'll find ourselves in the same situation. And I do think as a piece of this conversation, as we hear these reports about retail, as we hear these reports about what came out of the visioning session and the surveys and the various communications Erkin has had with the community, that we ask Erkin about the timetable for the fall and make sure that that is brought, it's open enough that some of the things that we've said we think we need to make sure this is a sufficient process, have time to happen in the fall, and that we at least marry what we are doing to what OP is doing enough that we're not operating on two different planes, which we seem to have done this spring and early summer. Thank you.
Okay, Alex.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Peter, for those clarifying points. Before I get into it too much, I just want to again thank the ANC for allowing me to join for this. Specifically, Erkin and I have had the opportunity to talk a number of times about this economic impact study and how it relates to the small area plan. So I'm going to be sharing a selection of pieces of information from it. I'm not going to be going over the full report of it in the hopes to really sort of lead into that small area plan discussion. My PowerPoint slides will probably take about 10 to 15 minutes. I believe Erkin's is for a similar schedule, and we wanted to make sure there was time available mainly for discussion and for feedback. So let me just share my screen. Are folks able to see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. So again, this is the Chevy Chase Main Street worked alongside DSLBD to bring together this retail market analysis. The city, when a new Main Street is established, as the Chevy Chase DC one was established last October, they specifically commit funds separate from the Main Street's operating costs to do a market analysis like this. So this is sort of a comparison thing. Excuse me, this is a complementary thing to the other programming that the Main Street has been working on. We've been a part of this process. And again, we've been working with OP as well as many different businesses and other stakeholders in the community for this information. I have a little bit of information about the Main Street. I think for the sake of time for tonight, I won't spend too much time on that. So I first wanted to show just again, like a map of the Main Street so folks get an understanding of the space that we're working in. So really we're operating on Connecticut Avenue between the Chevy Chase Circle as well as Livingston Street, the Starbucks as a point of reference, as well as the half blocks within the in-between. So that includes businesses like June B Suites and other ones that are sort of located just beyond the Connecticut Avenue space. I wanted to sort of begin this with all of this information is also available on our website. I'll be sure to post a link. It's publicly accessible. We have it right now as a PDF that folks can review digitally or print out or make use of. We're going to be speaking with the study's authors about how best to get print versions of it out, but we're really looking to make this information as widely accessible as possible. The first thing I wanted to highlight was the study boundaries. So on this map, you can see, in the smallest portion of really where the Main Street itself is, and which is formally considered the program area of the Main Street, but really trying to take into consideration that there are many people who come to the Chevy Chase Main Street from beyond these borders. So this map is really just to give an idea. And this boundary doesn't even include some of the areas like Silver Spring, or some of the, as you can see on the right side, some of the zip code information. This is based on credit card usage, where people are traveling to or from to get to the Main Street. I think one thing we've talked about frequently about the Main Street, and as it tries to better understand what the needs of the community are a balance of both the idea that the Main Street really seeks to serve those living in the area and make sure that, particularly during COVID-19, we've seen the importance of having accessible, walkable retail and services within the neighborhood, with also the understanding that many of these businesses rely on a larger market area as well, and trying to balance that to get a better understanding of what are the types of businesses, goods, and services that are a good fit for the Chevy Chase Main Street, and which types of things may not be as good of a fit and may find themselves in a home otherwise in Bethesda or Friendship Heights or other nearby areas. So wanted to provide this, and we can see that really over half of all of the credit card transactions really are within very close by, really just looking to Chevy Chase, Friendship Heights, and then the Chevy Chase, Maryland side. Wanted to also share a little bit of information about the customer base. Again, this is a little bit more of a breakdown of some of the more specific demographic markers of some of the folks that find themselves shopping and making use of the Main Street. We've also provided a couple of comparison points with other parts of DC. Chevy Chase Main Street is not necessarily working in the same scale or working to attract the same customer base as DC and other areas, but we wanted to include this information just to give folks an idea. One thing I wanted to highlight from the retail customer profile in particular, is I think it's often been touted, and rightfully so, that this ANC and this region in general serve many of our neighbors that are 64 and over. I also wanted to highlight in this that I was somewhat surprised to see the proportion, and again, this is based on credit card usage, the proportion of customers who are under 25 years old. Some of that information may come in from nearby Tenleytown and other areas like that, getting out more towards American University, but still trying to take account for the credit card information there. I think we've all known and celebrated that this is a corridor that really provides the needs for a wide range of folks. And I think it's just an interesting note that from the studies data, we also make sure that we're trying to understand that younger customer base, which could range from folks that are traveling to the area to make use, or even folks that are living in the area themselves. A couple other things I wanted to offer, and again, these are more just to give a context for the broader relationship of how these dynamics are in the broader DC ecosystem. One is just a note on the average market of rents, and you can see that Chevy Chase's rates, how they've increased how they've both increased in the last couple of years. Of course, information in the last 2 years, particularly related to COVID-19, has not been fully accounted for in this data. But I really wanted to provide these quick snapshots that give a little bit of an idea that Chevy Chase, the Main Street, does have on average higher retail rent and office rent than other portions of the city. Again, I think it's a broader question about what are the types of retail spaces we want to support and what are the types of office spaces we want to support. But when we're considering what types of businesses would be a good fit, it's important to keep in mind the competition of other parts of the city and what we can do to make sure that we can attract those services that would best serve the Main Street. Also wanted to highlight the business mix. This graph shows, again, a comparison point with a number of neighborhoods, and we can see that a large portion really are focused towards that neighborhood goods and services. There's, of course, specific neighborhood goods and services that are detailed further in the report itself, but I think it's just helpful to sort of see the Chevy Chase Main Street, more so than many of its contemporaries, really has a lot focused in those types of ways. And I think for a good reason. I think there's many people, be it a doctor's office visit, professional services related to taxes, anything like that, that really trying to have sort of one version of all those types of services in the corridor has been a priority, both for people who want to shop there and the businesses that are interested in opening there. So really just wanted to highlight again that Chevy Chase is very unique in that aspect, and trying to consider how the Main Street can sort of use that information about what customers to the Main Street are interested in to help make sure we're finding new services and new businesses that complement the services that are present. The end of the report includes a number of different recommendations and observations. These are just two of them. They relate to some steps that the Main Street is taking in the short term. The first is the retail vacancy and prioritizing the expanding current customer base. In the report, I didn't include the vacancy information about it. Compared to sort of looking at the surface of how many units of the total units in the Main Street are vacant, the Chevy Chase Main Street outperforms almost every other main street with a very small proportion of vacancies. However, we all know living here, working here, those vacancies are felt very differently. So that's something I've tried to continue to put forward to the city, not to just see, oh, the percent check mark is low enough that we don't need to make this a consideration. There are specific vacancies, particularly those properties such as the old Catch Can space, the Chevy Chase Arcade, and of course the previous American City Diner location. This report, I'm working in the next month. I've already set up some meetings and conversations with those landowners, which include Coakley, KLNB, and a couple other smaller firms as well. I've had some conversations with them in the past, trying to get a better understanding of what their targeting has been and how they've been marketing their locations. I am seeking now to meet with each of them and sort of review this report with them more fully and have conversations about what types of businesses are best supported, and particularly when it comes to the costs as well as the sizes of the retail spaces that are being offered, how the Main Street can help provide resources to landowners to make sure that we're able to actually fill these vacancies. Because again, a single vacancy in the Chevy Chase Main Street is felt more than it might be in other parts of the city. The second part that we're interested in particular is preserving and enhancing the Chevy Chase identity and the physical characteristics. This relates a little bit more to what Erkin, I believe, will be speaking further about. Right now, I know there's been a lot of conversation in the small area plan about the character of the neighborhood, and making sure to both preserve that as well as open new opportunities. Throughout the report, it's been listed several times that Chevy Chase Main Street is an area people feel comfortable with, and it's a very different area than Friendship Heights. It's an entirely different feeling. The Main Street is interested in supporting the small area plan. I think right now, sort of the largest discrete project that's been coming up in that plan and what's been shared so far has to do with the upgrades to the library and the community center. Even assuming that was really the main single piece of development that is happening, the Main Street's interested in continuing our work with the Office of Planning, and particularly trying to sort of take this vacancy strategy and trying to highlight the types of businesses that we believe best support the community and that the community would be most interested in supporting, and have that relay in to any discussions about density or the creation of new spaces that could be used for business or office space or anything like that, and making sure there's a coherent strategy with throughout. I believe Erkin can speak a little bit more about what the small area plan, what their planning process looks like from this perspective, but our goal is really sort of to target these vacancies in the first place as sort of a starting level of discrete places we can identify and work to get programming in, and then to work with the Office of Planning to take these same lessons, these same success stories, and weave that into the small area plan process. With that, I'd like to turn over to Erkin.
Thanks, Alex. And hello, commissioners from ANC 34G. Good evening. We just had a crazy hailstorm in my part of the district, so I'm happy that I'm online and able to communicate with everyone, and hope everyone's safe and home, not experiencing any kind of flooding or anything like that. But I will share my screen and sort of lead into a short presentation that I have as well, sort of piggybacking off of sort of where Alex left off. And then we thought it would just be maybe more efficient to have just Q&A towards the end for both of us. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule, so I'll try to be a little quick here. All right. So of the heads I can see, Commissioner Speck, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Thank you. So good evening, folks. My name is Erkin Osberg. I'm with the DC Office of Planning, and I'm the project manager for the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. And I really appreciate the opportunity tonight to share with you sort of where we've come from, where we're heading, particularly into the fall, moving forward with the small area planning process, and how we've been working together with the community and with our partner agencies, with Alex at the Main Street, to formulate the sort of the vision and the goals for the plan that we're working on now. So I have a few slides really just providing an overview, like I said, of where we're at and where we're going. First, I just wanted to start with a bit of a reminder about what the small area plan is and why we're here. And the small area plan was something that was an idea initiated with ANC 34G to help create a vision for land use changes that focused on what was described as the Chevy Chase Gateway. And we have funding in this current budget cycle forward. And the Chevy Chase sort of gateway and the land use change area from the comprehensive plan really aligns with the area that Alex was just talking about, the Main Street area, which is outlined in blue here on the map. The blocks north from Livingston up to Western Avenue in the Chevy Chase circle. And again, we sort of highlighted the Chevy Chase Community Center and Library, given that it's the largest property in this 4-block section, the largest single property in this 4-block section, and also an important opportunity that the district has identified for investment moving forward. And the small area plan is looking at how those investments can be better coordinated along with the Main Street and other projects that are happening along Connecticut Avenue, for example, led by our colleagues at DDOT as well. And I will say, just because Alex mentioned Friendship Heights, our office is also engaged in work across the ward, across the city. And so this isn't the only small area plan that we're working on, and this isn't the only planning effort we're working on. And so we're also contextualizing sort of this relatively small area within the larger district and Ward 3 as well. In terms of the focus of the small area plan, it's really focusing on 5 areas, which we'll talk about a little bit later as it relates to some of our engagement work that we've done. And that is, we have a policy priority around housing, and particularly affordable housing that was mentioned earlier in tonight's meeting with the representative from Council Member Janice George's office. And second item is, again, sort of focusing on the Chevy Chase Community Center and Library and exploring opportunities to accommodate housing there. A thriving and sustainable Connecticut Avenue Main Street. This is really, Alex's purview, but we're working with him and others to sort of think about the short term, but also the long term, how it stays sustainable and how to reproduce some of the successes that I think this community has seen and appreciated in the past. And then, neighborhood identity and commemorative works, which really sort of focuses on a lot of conversations that have already been happening in the neighborhood around naming and storytelling and history and what is important and what needs to be carried through into the future around the identity of this neighborhood. And finally, the fifth item was really around connecting the dots, how people get around in the neighborhood, how everybody can get around safely and comfortably, whether it's walking, biking, taking transit, driving as well. So that's sort of the overview of the small area plan process for those who may be tuned in who have not participated yet. And I'll give an overview sort of where we are in the process and where we're heading. So we kicked off publicly on March 4th. We had a meeting which was very well attended and sort of following from left to right on the screen. We've moved through in the spring and early summer through the visioning session, which helps to inform the plan development phase, which we'd be moving into in the fall. And ultimately, as a small area plan, there will be a legislative component later in the winter where this the plan document itself will go to council following a mayoral hearing. So where we are now, we're sort of at the end of the visioning phase in the summer, leading into the fall, where we'll be focusing on plan development. So to give just an overview of sort of where we're at so far and what we've been working on, the project team at OP and with our partner agencies and the Community Advisory Committee, which is composed of 15 members from the community, mostly from community organizations. We have 2 commissioners, Commissioner Chang, Commissioner Goslin, who are on the Community Advisory Committee, been working with us to develop and implement the small area plans community engagement strategy. And that started, we had a few meetings that started before our March 4th kickoff, where as I mentioned, we had quite a strong participation and some office hours that my colleague Heba and I offered in April to help sort of answer questions that maybe folks weren't able to get to during the kickoff, or that they had subsequent to that kickoff. And then in April, our Director Trueblood, actually joined this ANC twice for 2 separate Q&A sessions about the small area plan and sort of how it fits within the broader planning framework in the district. And I think both of those sessions were pretty well attended. And then from April, end of April to about the end of June, with many of our Community Advisory Committee partners, there was a series of different activities, of course, all virtually held, all sort of on Zoom or other platforms, focusing on key topics that were identified from our engagements, from talking to folks in the community that folks just needed some more information on, or had questions about, or could help sort of get people thinking about certain topics that related to the plan. So some of those 5 topics I mentioned earlier, particularly around housing and affordable housing, neighborhood history, and the planning process itself, as well as streetscapes and public space, and how to create sort of lively places for people, places that already exist in parts of Connecticut Avenue and in Chevy Chase. And then from May 15th to June 12th, well, those are 2 separate events, but here's a photo of my colleague Heva and I were out at the farmers market and at the Lafayette Pointer Park celebration, sort of talking to folks about the small area plan, getting them to sign up and join our visioning workshops and survey that we held in May and June. And I should mention, as Alex mentioned, that all of this information is also available on our website, publicinput.com/ChevyChase. And all of these events that I'm listing, the slides from those events or the videos in some cases, or other materials are available for folks to watch at their convenience as well, to sort of catch up if they are sort of just hearing about this for the first time. And so all of those activities were contributing and leading up to our visioning activities, which were held in June and online through our workshops and our survey. So I'll cover each of them separately. So the first was we held 4 workshops sort of at different times and on different days to try to catch different folks given sort of schedules. Each of the workshops were the same. In total, we had about 80 community participants who joined those workshops. We had different participation throughout those 4 days. We found that the Tuesday evening and Wednesday midday had the highest attendance, so that was helpful for us as we're thinking about future opportunities to engage with folks. The way these workshops were structured is that we had a main room that was facilitated by a consultant of ours, Link Strategic Partners, using Zoom, and that from this main room, there were breakout sort of mini rooms of 4 to 5 participants, and these breakout conversations were facilitated by OP staff and a member of our community advisory committee using what's called the Mural online whiteboard tool. And here's a little image on the side of the slide that shows what that whiteboard tool looks like that we used in those meetings. And these breakout rooms provide opportunity for folks to talk amongst each other and ask us questions, but also really just share their thoughts and opinions about some key questions that we were asking about the community, about the neighborhood, about the corridor, as we were focusing on those topics for the small area plan. There were 6 questions that we focused on in the workshop, and they really focused around what people valued, what they were concerned about, and thoughts that they had around inclusive change in the neighborhood. From some of our conversations with our facilitators after these meetings, just some observations were that there were a diversity of participants and perspectives in these groups in terms of lived experience, which I think folks really appreciated. And there were many familiar faces and names, folks that are regularly active in community events, and also some newcomers to local public process, folks who hadn't maybe participated in some of the previous ANC or other community activities. And so that was considered a good thing. So the workshops, like I said, were sort of held on those 4 days, and they were supplemented by an online visioning survey, which was open for about 6 weeks from May 14th to June 24th. And here was a different opportunity for people to participate and engage, asking some similar questions, but also some different questions. And so here's some information around sort of who we heard from in that survey. We didn't ask for identifying information in the workshops themselves, but on the survey, we're able to ask questions about the people who are taking the survey. And so, I think that's always helpful as we're looking at what we heard to also understand who we're hearing it from. And I should mention that all this information is on the website now, and I can show you quickly before we move on to the Q&A. But in terms of sort of who we heard from, I think it aligns with some of the demographic information that we know about sort of this particular neighborhood in particular. 95% of the folks who participated say they live nearby Connecticut Avenue, and 62% shop or take care of household tasks nearby. So these are folks who have a pretty intimate knowledge of the area. Over 2/3 have either lived, worked, or shopped in this area for over 11 years. So they have sort of a time investment and connection to the place. Walking, we heard a lot about walking in the workshop. We heard a lot about walking in the survey. And that seemed to be the primary means of how folks who responded get around. Most folks either lived sort of off of Connecticut Avenue and some of the side streets or on Connecticut Avenue itself. The racial demographics align somewhat with the neighborhood demographics. We did find that in terms of age, the survey was, I think, able to hit a demographic that is a little bit on the younger side compared to some of our other engagements that we've had. So it was a fairly diverse age group that responded as well. As I said, the survey featured about 20 questions. These were mostly multiple choice. About half the questions were some of those self-identifying information, and the other half were really more substantive. Folks in the neighborhood had a lot to say beyond the multiple choice questions. There were a lot of free answer questions because we recognized that not everything fits in a checkbox. And so there were about 1,700 written comments in the survey as well, which we've sort of gone through and looked at as well. And from both the workshops and the survey, what we found in terms of the input was that discussions really coalesced around sort of 6 main themes. And these themes are so where we're starting from to work out the vision and goals for the plan moving forward. And these themes, not surprisingly, align with some of those priorities that we shared early on. A lot of the questions touched on these items as they are sort of the focus of the small area planning process. So the first is the social and cultural character of the neighborhood. And this is really about sort of people. A lot of what we heard about was that people valued the friendliness of the neighborhood, the diversity that existed, and interest in expanding that diversity in the neighborhood, in terms of people, but also just in terms of services and amenities that are available. Inclusivity was considered to be an important aspect of the present, but also the future. And also resilience. And when I say resilience, what I'm talking about is, again, sort of those networks and relationships that exist in the community, sort of strong feelings of the past, and an interest in seeing those practices and events and activities carried into the future. So things around memories that people had around sort of walking with their kids to school, or relationships that they had with local business owners, and the strength of the community, which is really a function of those relationships that are established in the community. The second piece was around sort of physical neighborhood character. And this is a little bit of what Alice was talking about earlier, around people valuing the human scale, sort of green, sort of greener streets and properties that exist in the neighborhood, and that ability to sort of see friendly faces and familiarity of the buildings, but also of people. And a real value for some of the historic assets in the neighborhood, particularly the Avalon Theater and some of those other buildings that folks have a strong relationship with. And so those are, sort of these 6, I would say some of the 2 kind of more ideological, and then the next 4 kind of get more into sort of the physical. And so the third is what we're calling right now the civic core, and this is really the community center and library property. We heard a lot about this property for obvious reasons. Given sort of that it has been on the agenda for the last few years in the community. People have been doing a lot of work and thinking around it, and really how it could function as a mixed-use campus moving forward with housing and enhanced public space, and how it really is the social and physical core and heart of the corridor moving forward, both in terms of where it is, but also in terms of the experience that people have there and would like to continue to have there. And so sort of starting from that core, the next sort of piece is the corridor itself. Folks really appreciated the mix of neighborhoods serving independent shops and services, and really demonstrated a value for that and wanting to see it sustained, expanded, retained, strengthened over time. And then the next 2 are sort of more sort of neighborhood level, and this is looking for ways of providing and exploring more inclusive housing options in the neighborhood. And so that would accommodate a greater range of incomes, ages, and also racial diversity in the neighborhood. And so those are some of the things we were hearing about those items. And then finally, how people get around, how people cross the corridor, crossing Connecticut Avenue, pedestrian safety was highlighted as something that's really important and needs to be addressed in the small area plan and a high goal, particularly accessing the circle itself and just safe, comfortable walking along Connecticut Avenue. We heard a lot about transit and the bus lines in the neighborhood, desire for safer biking, which currently doesn't exist. And we heard a lot about parking and sort of a need for clear parking provisions in the planning process moving forward. And so these are the sort of the 6 themes, again, that we've gleaned from from what we've heard from the visioning workshops and survey so far. And the idea and the intent is that these will be crafted into the vision for the small area plan and the goals, which will inform the plan development stage moving forward, where we have more detailed conversations around what future development and buildings could look like and how they might contribute to some of these themes, some of what Alex was talking about earlier around business retention and expansion in the corridor and sort of the sustainability of a thriving mixed-use corridor moving forward. And so what that looks like moving forward is we'll be moving into the fall into the plan development phase, which will start with a design charrette, which is sort of our next engagement, community engagement activity for after September or later. And that a design charrette is sort of an interactive, more hands-on activity to look at and think about space and buildings together. And so we're excited about that. And from what we've been hearing and learning in the visioning phase, we'll be informing sort of specifically what we're going to be looking at there, which sites along the corridor we're going to be focusing in on. We heard, for example, that there is a difference and an interest in sorry about the light, the east and west side of the Connecticut Avenue corridor and different focuses based on what's there now and what could be there in the future. And so, clearly I think what we've heard is that there's more opportunity to look at potential future development on the east side of Connecticut Avenue, northbound heading towards Maryland. And so those are some areas we're going to be looking at. We also heard about some sites on the west side that folks are kind of interested in seeing some change around, for example, the diner that's been closed for a while. And so those are areas where we're going to be drilling down a little bit more on in the design charrette process moving forward. Between now and then, we're working on completing a few things. As I mentioned, the draft vision and goals, which are founded in the survey and workshop material, and also our existing conditions report, focusing on some of the market conditions in the neighborhood, as well as just a overview of sort of what's there and how it's working in terms of public space, transportation, housing, history, all of those kinds of topics. And so those are reports that we're working on completing with our agency partners, which we're also sharing the outcomes and results from our visioning with our agency partners as well, so they can that information can get funneled back to them. And in terms of a next step for us, we're really looking forward to Chevy Chase Day on September 18th, where we will be out and I think tabling probably with or next to Alex in the Main Street to talk about all of this stuff and sort of hear more from the community and connect with folks who have either already been connecting with us or are new to the process moving forward. I did just want to, I think that's my last slide, yeah. And I did just want to respond, I think, to Commissioner Goslin's point earlier about flexibility in the fall moving forward. We originally were sort of looking at this schedule, but as we continue through the process, there is flexibility to move out a little bit if we do need extra time to get through these steps. And so we are committed to doing that and working with the ANC as we have been to make sure that we're aligned moving forward. So we really look forward to that process, and we'll leave it there for now.
Well, thank you both so much, Alex. It was really great to see your survey. I can't wait to actually dig in a little bit more. So thank you for sharing the link. I think that it's very important actually for us to know how we are unique, how we compare to others, and who does shop here, and what is it that we're looking for is really important. And thank you, Erican, for that update. I think it's important for people to know how many comments you received, and that it will take you some time to get through 1,700 comments and be able to share it out. I'm looking forward to seeing more of those details, I think. And I guess I will open it to the rest of the commission to ask either Alex or Erkin some questions.
Connie?
John, please.
Yes, for those who are just getting into that, my perception and the perception of others might be is there are sort of two broad areas here. One is the gateway, the immediate Chevy Chase Circle to Livingston store. 3 blocks down, 3 blocks north and south, and maybe a half a block east and west. And the second chunk of this is more broader concepts, I guess, like general density and neighborhood and individual residential housing. Can you kind of clarify where OP is in each of those two chunks of future thinking?
Sure, yeah, Commissioner Higgins. So the small area plan is focused specifically on those 4 blocks from Livingston north to the circle. When we look at any place, we have to understand the context. And so the dashed line around the 2 blocks in either direction, east, west, and south to military that we're looking at for the small area plan, that's where we sort of draw our line for doing our data analysis. I didn't mention earlier, in advance of the survey and workshops, we sent postcard mailers to every address in that dashed area. It was 1,900 addresses. So again, that's sort of where we focus in our analysis, but also our engagement. Of course, all of our engagement activities are open to anyone who is an interest and a relationship to this area, but we do have to make decisions on where we draw, literally and figuratively draw the line when we're doing our analysis and our engagement. And so we recognize that the folks who sort of live and work sort of in that immediate radius are the most affected. And so that's where we are focusing our analysis and our engagement. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so those dotted lines are basically the market surrounding the gateway stores.
I wouldn't, not exactly the market. Some of the maps that Alex showed provide a sort of a more of that sort of market area. But when we sort of decided to hone in on those 4 blocks, that was the area around those 4 blocks that we focused in on. And there's other reasons for that. We kept it within ANC 3G, sort of heading, in the western direction. We obviously didn't extend into Maryland. So there's some other considerations that went into that, but we felt that those sort of 2 block radius around the gateway, as you described it, is where we wanted to focus.
You mentioned you had like 568 people in the breakout sessions. What do you consider a reasonable sampling of responses? Then you've got 1,700 other responses. We've got about 15 or 16,000 people in.
Sure. So we had 80 people participate in the workshops, and we had 568 survey respondents. So that's, just to clarify, those are the numbers that I shared. The survey is was not designed to be, nor should it be understood as statistically representative of the neighborhood. The survey respondents were self-selecting individuals who also have, it was an online survey, so they also have the technological capability of taking the survey. So, we do want to be clear on, the sort of those understandings. We do this kind of thing because it's a way to get more or different kinds of people that would come to a meeting, digital or in person. You know, especially during COVID or even not during COVID, folks aren't necessarily able to take an hour and a half or 2 hours out of their evening or morning to participate in something. And so being able to do it on their own time, we found is a way to broaden the kinds of people who will participate in our process. So there isn't, so anyway, I think just to answer your question, this isn't a statistically representative group, but it helps us broaden who we get to talk to in this process.
I was just going to say, Eric, and you didn't share that you're also talking to like the Garfield apartment dwellers. You did that recently, and you said that you would be open to more if there were people who are interested.
Yeah, we've in all of our events and activities, and for the folks listening, if you have a meeting or if there's an activity or event that's coming up, feel free to reach out to us. If we're able, we'd be happy to join to talk about the small area plan or answer questions. Correct, Mr. Chang. So week before last, I actually went in person. It was the first sort of in-person meeting I'd been to in a while, to the Garfield condominium building on Connecticut Avenue, and spoke to, I think, about 25 or 30 residents who tuned in both in person and via Zoom. It was a hybrid meeting. Just answering questions like these and talking about the small area plan and explaining sort of why we're doing it and encouraging folks to get engaged and get involved.
Let me weigh in here. I joined Erkin at the Garfield and found it an interesting presentation. I have to say, going to Alex's retail study, I'm kind of amazed I live here, given I guess it's the median income of households in this area. It's pretty impressive. Surprising it doesn't support even a more robust Main Street corridor. I want to say I'm pleased to see that there since the Garfield meeting, I think the timeline that Erkin presented shows some more room in the fall than I saw before for the whole period back to the beginning of this small area plan. And I think that's important because I do think that building on Commissioner Higgins' comments, that there is a need for more community engagement on this, and engagement of community members with community members about what they think about their community, what they think about the future of their community. I think that that happening either before or after the design charrette is fine. I just want to be sure we have time for it. I mean, this commission has said as recently as April 26th that it wants to sponsor community forums, and it also wants to sponsor more information exchange, seminars, events that let us explore what we could do with a community plan. And I want to be sure that we have time for that. And Erkin, just if you could address that issue. As I say, I think your timeline has changed some and has been pushed out, and I'm really encouraged by that. The other thing I'd ask you is that, I mean, for example, in the slide of the timeline, you add the Chevy Chase Day on September 18th. As soon as we get some dates for forums, for the kinds of information exchange sessions that this commission has talked about, I hope, even though you will only be assisting us in that, that those could be integrated into OP's timeline. Can they?
Yes, and thank you. And we're looking forward to participating, partnering on those information exchanges and forums that the ANC is working on, hoping to, I think, make some decisions around, like you said, dates, and also, I think, particular format and topics. And so yes, I mean, And I think, as I think you had mentioned earlier, something about two different planes. I mean, I think we see it as one plane, the planning process and our work so far, and our work with the ANC as far as Director Trueblood's participation in meetings and our participation in these meetings. You know, as I was saying earlier, if there's an invitation, we will show up unless there's some kind of hailstorm or something that might prevent us from doing that. But we've been really actually encouraged by the ability to start being out in person in the community, starting with the farmers market, being at the park, coming to Chevy Chase Day, going to the Garfield last week. So whether it's online, we recognize that not everybody is still comfortable with in-person events, or whether it's in person, we're happy to join and participate. So yes.
Commissioner Speck.
Thanks, Erkin and Alex, both for very good presentations. Erkin, I was really particularly interested in the 6 areas that you gleaned from looking at the survey responses and at the visioning workshops. I know that they're at a pretty high level at this point, but they did strike me as representing at least my understanding of what the community wants in this process. I thought it was all very consistent with the kinds of things I hear from the community as well. The one area that I wanted to ask about particularly, though, I think it was the 4th one, about the retail businesses. And you did mention that independent businesses were desirable. The other thing I think that many people in the community want is that we need to protect the businesses that are there. And I know Alex feels strongly about that as well, that those businesses in some respects have a right of first refusal for anything. They ought to be given particular attention, I think, because we've got some businesses there that have been there a long time, that are really a part of the fabric of the community. And I'm hopeful that whatever we do in the small area plan is going to take particular cognizance of the need to do something to make sure that we continue to have mom and pop kinds of stores that are catering really to the community, and who really, those people are our friends, and they're people we rely on. So we're hopeful that all of those people can have a place, a prominent place in the future for the communities, for the Chevy Chase Gateway.
Alex, why don't you go?
Yeah, Alex, yes, please.
Just as a quick response, I just wanted to highlight, over the weekend, it was a sort of interesting rollout. The city actually just announced a new grant program that they're calling the Great Streets Legacy Small Business Recovery Grant, that is specifically targeted to businesses within the district that have been open for 20+ years. I'm excited to see that. I know some of our businesses qualify for it. We send a weekly newsletter about grant announcements like that, and I'm going to be following up with some businesses in particular that I think might be eligible. So I agree with you very much about those legacy businesses and their needs. Certainly they are the ones that have been navigating challenges, even from how do we do trash pickup from areas where the parking lots are smaller, and how do we coordinate delivery. So I think their experience, and this is something I've spoken with Erkin throughout this, is whatever new development is coming, they've really been through the ringer of it so far and experiencing all the different ways Chevy Chase is. So we're glad to be plugged in with their effort with that. And with regarding for, the types of businesses, we're also interested in supporting those. And what I'm hoping to raise more with some of the landlords is particularly for some of the retail spaces, so the sizes of them and the types of businesses, even from are they a co-op or a group of businesses coming together for one space? I'm very interested in exploring with them ways that we can sort of, again, have those types of businesses that, because of increases in rents and the sort of market value of these things that may otherwise not have found a place in the main street, that we can still have those types of experiences and businesses here. So I would just say that's all been included in sort of what I'm trying to reach out with some of these vacant groups with, but I want to give to Peter as well.
And could I just add, I just want to hop on with what Randy said about protecting existing businesses. I've spoken to a lot of those owners over the years, and it seems like they've all encountered issues with rent increases and other things that it makes it impossible for them to do business. And so I'm hoping that the Chevy Chase Main Street will have some kind of reserve fund or something where they can turn to you for help before they make that ultimate decision to leave. Because once they leave, I mean, the neighborhood is bereft. I mean, I do miss Periwinkle's, Catch Can. These are businesses we've gone to for years and years and years and years, and then all of a sudden they just disappear. It's not good. And so if there's some way to do that, that would be really good. I think we need help.
If I may, just a very quick response to that. So we've in the past worked with DC Pro Bono with some of those. We've had some businesses approach us about that. It has become enough of a, I don't want to get too much into which businesses have approached us and what their needs are. The dynamic you've described is accurate, and COVID-19, particularly with agreements with folks about forgoing rent for certain amounts of times or making amendments to leases, has sort of opened a new can of worms of sometimes agreements were made that actually violated the original terms of the lease, and other things that have sort of put pressure on those businesses, to such that the pro bono services, we've sort of exceeded the amount, our need sort of exceeds their capacity. The Main Street has actually already made an investment in getting actually with a private law firm that specializes in tenant relationships and sort of working with them to sort of provide professional legal advice to businesses. So that's something we've also been trying to advertise more and speak with businesses further. So far, we've had a couple take us up on that and had some of those meetings, but we continue to have funds set aside for that specific legal representation. And I'll pause there.
Following on to Alex's comment and Connie's first with regard to businesses that have been here an immense amount of time, I think many of the obvious candidates are on the west side of Connecticut, which I represent, and I hope, Alex, we could go together to some of them. Parthenon is an example. I think that this area, which Commissioner Speck brought up, is one that has not been addressed, and I completely understand why it has not been addressed by OP. This is sort of beyond their mandate, but I attended a Ward 3 Vision session about building a Main Street, and it articulated views that are all ones I support. The problem is that it didn't tell us how to keep the businesses that are very much part of the identity of our community, particularly during transition periods. If we ever get anything new built other than at the community center library, it's going to be disruptive. And these businesses can't survive 2 years shut down or in a trailer or who knows where. And then I wanted to ask one question of Alex. I have to say, if our vacancy rate is low by comparison with other commercial areas, God save this city. I mean, really? I mean, on my side of Connecticut Avenue, the side of Connecticut Avenue I represent, sort of every 2 or 3 storefronts is empty right now. I mean, it's really demoralizing and can't possibly be good for business. I mean, where's that statistic come from that we're in a better shape than other main streets?
That statistic is really just coming from a very rote comparison of saying, what is the total number of businesses that are open on the corridor versus what is the total number of vacancies that are currently present. And again, that has to do a little bit more with what my experience has been with the Office of Planning and sort of where, the Main Street, or excuse me, not the Office of Planning, with DSLBD, we respond to sort of what they're, we target our funding in the ways that they are interested in. And as the example, I didn't include the specific amount in my presentation, but by counts of this, which this would include retail spaces that are sort of upstairs and not street level, there's currently 82% of the Main Street is occupied. So a vacancy rate of 18%. Again, that's sort of, when the city looks at that number, they might be looking at it like an area with Columbia Heights, which has possibly 2 to 4 times as many total businesses. So it's, as a comparison point, it's really not that helpful. I understand, and I hear sort of that, again, the demoralizing nature of just seeing, the Catch Can space, which is a place where everyone, knew that space, knew the owners. There were people that were a part of the neighborhood, closing just before COVID and then immediately coming into COVID. it really is an effect. I think the other sort of thing that we have in Chevy Chase, which might be a little more unique, is that there's actually a smaller number of property owners and that they tend to be larger organizations. So Ketchikan and some of the things on the west side is currently represented by the Coakley Group. It's sort of been a larger conversation about a bundle of their properties. And in some cases, I know they've sort of touted trying to say, what if we try and rent the entire building? What if we subdivide the building in a couple of different ways? But I very much understand you. And when I present that vacancy rate, it's the reason I didn't want to just present it as a call out and say, it's great. We're doing so much better than every other main street. Vacancies here are absolutely a priority. And from this report, that's sort of the best first step I can take is addressing those.
Commissioner Gore.
Yeah, Alex or Erkin, can you let me know, is there any roll up? So you guys are doing a big roll up of, the community survey, which is targeted towards individuals. I'm kind of interested to know if you contemplated doing the same thing for businesses. Is there any thought about that in the future? I don't know if you guys have done that or if you've thought about it, but I think all of us are really concerned about the businesses that are located on an avenue now and making sure that we could do what we can and make, support them through this SAP process. Can you kind of expand on that? Just how are you kind of collating all of their thoughts and concerns and making sure that's brought forward into the SAP process?
And would you like to start with that, or I can, or?
Why don't you, Alex?
Sure. So the sort of my big goal with Erkin and his team is to actually have a specific business engagement forum.
Okay.
We've seen that sort of succeed in other parts with the Connecticut Avenue reversible lane study, where the Cleveland Park Main Street was actually able to get a sit down with DDOT to specifically have those business interests there. For the time being, and I want to let Erkin have space for this, I think we've sort of discussed that given the time requested of the businesses, particularly these visioning workshops, which can be several hours long and are sort of 1,000 feet above, I think we're interested in sort of approaching them for a more specific engagement once this visioning plan is in a place where we can present a more discrete product to the business owners and say, what do you think about this? What from this do you think would work for you? And what are the things that you think would not work for you? And it being easier for them to engage in that level rather than really starting at the highest. I would love for Erkin to follow that though.
Yeah, I mean, so far we've been having individual conversations with business owners and property owners sort of on an ad hoc basis. Again, partly because we know they're busy, and so it has to be on sort of a time frame and that's convenient for them. We have had some business owners participate in some of our office hours and visioning activities. One of the other things I should mention, which I think you all probably know, and is maybe another unique factor of the Chevy Chase commercial area, which is a little bit harder to glean from some of this work, is a lot of the business operators live in the neighborhood. That's kind of unique. That's unique, right? And so, when people talk about a small town feel, like that's kind of what they're talking about. It's people share experience. But I think we just have to be thoughtful of the fact that how replicable is that moving forward? And when we're talking about business retention, we also, we look at the longer term, and we're sort of working with Alex on the shorter term, recognizing that the programmatic needs of the business community today are things best suited for DSLBD and some of our other agencies. We're looking at more the 5-year out horizon. And so when I look at that, I'm thinking about things like also the age of some of the business operators and what happens when they continue to retire, because we've seen some of those retirements already in the community that weren't necessarily COVID specific. And so we recognize, and I've worked in business districts for a long time, those, not everybody who doesn't run a business understands some of those things. And so it can leave a hole in the community. And so, one thing that's I think important for the business community to think about, for this community to think about is, are there transition plans that those businesses have themselves that keep the business there, even if the main proprietor, founder, retires or moves on or whatever the case may be, because that's part of life. And so, we're also trying to be mindful of, are there elements that people really value and that are successful now that can be reproduced and replicated in the future to maintain the aspects that people really value about this community now. And that's the kind of intangible stuff. It's hard, but first sort of identifying it and saying that it's real is the first step in trying to do something about it. So.
I also just want to add a different part of that strategy is there are a lot of local entrepreneurs in our neighborhood who don't have storefronts in our neighborhood. So Bullfrog Bagels is in our, I mean, they're just a few blocks away from me, the owner, but he does not have a storefront in our neighborhood. He has a storefront on like down in Capitol Hill over there. And there are other entrepreneurs. So I think maybe there should be a way for us to give you names, you know, and for you to maybe contact some of these owners to see what would it take for them to have their business kind of be located in our neighborhood. Like what are the barriers to making that happen? Is it because the rents are that much higher? What's going on there? So that I think is another part of that strategy of making sure that that local entrepreneurs who live here already feel like they're welcome to start to have a place in our neighborhood that they're able to.
John's had his hand up for a while.
I'm sorry, I didn't see. Okay.
I was happy to hear Alex mention that I guess we have a relatively small number of property, you know, beyond the business is the property owner versus the retail operator. And heaven forfend if we have a situation with an LLC with 150 members who own a half a parcel, and we have to deal with that kind of thing. So I'm hoping, or do you have, this is for both Alex and Erkin, do you have an ownership profile of what's on the street there? Who owns what? We just had a little mention about community bulletin boards, and I guess it was the Safeway guy said there's a strip of land that 3 people own. That could be troublesome. And one other thing, if it's not too far afield, one of the first articles I ever wrote as a business journalist was about business succession. Is it too far afield for the OP to or maybe, you know, through UDC, through AU, through some business school, we could help people with their succession planning? Is that something we should think about?
Just as a quick response, so yeah, but with regards to the Safeway ownership, yes, that is a dynamic where there are multiple owners. I will say right now that the Main Street doesn't have like a specific document or guide to each property and the ownership within it. Typically when that's come up, I've used the DC Tax Atlas or other sort of resources to try and do that mapping myself and keep it as a discrete document. I think for the time being, we haven't really identified sort of, you know, doing the work to sort of do that full mapping based on the information that is available in the tax database. I would need to think a little bit more about what would the end use of that report be outside of these circumstances where I'm trying to sort of get that information. I'm open to doing that, and I'm going to continue sort of pressing in that space and trying to collect that information. But right now we don't have a formal document or guide for that. And then Erkin, I think that second one was more for you.
Yeah, and just the short answer is yes, there is, we do have documentation of the property ownership for every property in the district. The long answer is that you don't always really know who that is sometimes because it might be an LLC. Well, most of the time it's an LLC for commercial property. And so even sometimes the same owner may have multiple LLCs. So sort of connecting the dots between who actually owns it and how it's legally owned gets a little gray sometimes. And so, yes, we have the information, it's documented in our systems, and we can map it, and it's part of that existing conditions analysis that we're developing. The short answer is sort of, to Alex's point, of what you can really do with it and how it can be operationalized is a slightly different question. But I think the point is there aren't an overwhelming number of properties in the corridor right now, and actually particularly on the east side, even though the Safeway property is somewhat unique, there is more consolidated ownership of some of those larger properties, which does provide different kinds of opportunities for more direct conversations around what could be possible. And actually on the west side too, there's some consolidated ownership that we're aware of, for example, with the Starbucks and things like that.
Peter, just a second, if your comment, I think we should allow some comments from the attendees, any questions or comments that they have. And then we could go on with this forever, but
I agree. So let me just say, I was about to propose, we're 10 minutes over our entire meeting time, as it is. I'd be happy to take comments from the public. The one idea I would just like to introduce to my fellow commissioners is that I think the fall is going to be very important for making this small area plan as good as it can be made where we are today. I would like you to entertain the notion of having a meeting before September 13th, because that is well into September, an important month. So I don't ask for answers from you tonight, but I just think that it would be a smart thing for us to talk out how we're going to do this in the fall before we get to the fall. But I don't want to, I have no more interest than any of the rest of you in ruining August. So okay, I'm happy, Randy, for you to take questions from the public, and then we'll wrap this.
Connie, go ahead.
I was just going to say, who does someone just have to raise their hand if they'd like to ask a question? Just raise your hand, please.
Or make a comment.
I think Lisa.
Comments in the chat, and we're going to keep all of those, of course.
Yeah. So one, I'm just going to read this out loud. So Jeff Norman, who's been patiently, I guess, in the attendance, has asked, has OP looked into the possibility that the second and third floors of some of the street level businesses could be apartments? My own grandfather, who lived in a different neighborhood, had a business on the first floor and the family lived on the second floor. This pattern existed throughout the world for centuries. So I guess that's for Erican.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. That's a great comment. You're absolutely right. Sort of the co-location of business owner and operator within the same building is an age-old pattern. So to be honest, I mean, that is, and maybe I wasn't clear about that at the beginning of my section, but one of the main reasons why the land use changes were made in the comprehensive plan and that we're pursuing the small area plan process is specifically to explore how to get housing over stores in the future, particularly as I was talking about some of those sites along the corridor that are like parking lots now that could be redeveloped potentially with retail on the bottom and apartments or condominiums up top. So more houses, more homes, more customers for the commercial district moving forward. So that's very much one of the driving forces behind doing this planning process, is to create a more sort of mixed use environment that enlivens the corridor and helps it thrive and sustain in the future with more residents.
I'll also add, from the Main Street's perspective, we've been interested particularly in the M&T Bank location, as well as the Citibank location, which are M&T. They've sort of changed their operations. It's mainly the first floor. Citibank, it's been absent. About how those spaces could be used above. The Main Street is interested in, of course, the business use of them, but I think the way that I've tried to sort of look at this is, I think some of the property owners, particularly prior to COVID, that had vacancies, sort of looked at COVID. And again, when we didn't know if this was going to be a 3-week thing or a year and a half or a still continuing thing, some people sort of said, I'll wait it out and see what the market is. I think we're now entering a point where some of those landlords that may have sort of waited and wanted to see how market conditions were changing may be more open now to different types of uses of their space. So part of what my goal is with this report is to go to those places that are managing currently vacant places and to say, you know, if you're having trouble finding a commercial tenant, is there another use here that could be served?
Okay, I would suggest then that we move on to, we don't have any other hands raised. I think we should move on to the next item in the agenda. Alex and Erkin, thank you very much. We're going to be hearing from you and seeing you many, many times over the next few months. So thank you very much.
Thanks, commissioners, and have a nice August if I don't see or interact with you for the next 2 weeks.
Thank you very
much. Finally got rain.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a report from the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee. And Lisa, you want to give an update, and particularly the meeting that we held with council members and the commander of the 2nd District?
Yeah. So on July 15th, members of the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee met with, well, let me just say that we had some scheduling conflicts, and Chief Conti was supposed to be at that meeting, but was unable to attend when we had to reschedule it. And his conflict was at the last minute. So in his place, Kelly O'Meara participated, and Second District Commander Betleon, I cannot pronounce his name right,
Deadly.
but participated as well. And we had council members Che, council member Louis George, and council member Pinto. Just to let everyone know, council member Robert White has contacted me again, so he wants to schedule a separate meeting. And I did meet with his staff prior to this meeting, and he wants to follow this up with the meeting himself. So I'm really happy about his support of that. And we had a good deal of the members of the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee there. Commissioner Jocelyn attended, as well as Commissioner Chang. So thank you guys for participating. It was a long meeting. It was probably about 2 hours. It was very, very long. But it was a good meeting in the sense that we have a really good starting point, I think, of understanding where MPD is coming from with this data. So just to let everyone know, the data pretty much showed non-traffic stop, so non-vehicle traffic stop data for a roughly 18-19 month period in Second District, which comprises parts of Ward 2, parts of Ward 3, and parts of Ward 4. They roughly have 9 PSA, so PSA 201 down to I think 208 or 209. And so that data showed roughly 65% of the non-traffic stops were Blacks in this Second District area, whereas the data shows that the Black population is 7%. So one of the issues that we were talking to them about is to explain the disparity in the data. And the bottom line is MPD is not sure that the best measure of disparity in terms of data in their traffic stops is census data, so that population data. So that was a big discussion point in the meeting. How do they, measure it? What are they currently doing? What do they have plans to do in the future? So one of the things that they are, or they told us about is a study, I believe it's with Howard University and Georgetown, 2 universities here, I believe Howard and Georgetown, undertaking a study to actually answer that question. What is the best way to answer the question, do we have disparities in police activity? So whether it's non-traffic stops or traffic related stops, what type of data do you use to indicate disparity? They gave us a bunch of statistics on the data. They said about 53% of the data was calls for service, which was a really interesting discussion. I'm not going to go into all that. They talked about a couple different blocks that have a lot of calls for service. So one of them is in Georgetown, I believe, 3300 block of Water Street and a 5300 block of Wisconsin. Let's see, what else? 72%, and I don't want to get these numbers conflated, but 72%. So that we were talking about, I think they brought up some of the traffic stops because they talked about 72% is traffic related, where we were dealing strictly with this meeting, the non-traffic data. So that's pretty much the meat of it. I mean, there was a lot of discussion on this call, and we talked about a lot of different areas within context of the non-traffic stop data and also outside of that context. We are going to have to get back together as a committee to decide our next steps forward. There is a ton of research, and I have to give kudos to Ron, who mentioned this in our Racial and Social Equity Committee. There is one thing, that's really disappointing to me, honestly, I have to be honest about this. there are hundreds of departments that have done these studies. And Ron kind of mentioned that in the meeting with MPD. And after he mentioned it, and I talked to a couple people, I went back and kind of looked at that myself, and it's just all over the place. I mean, there's departments, large departments, small departments, rural departments, departments in big major cities that have been trying to answer this question going back to the early 90s. So it's disappointing that, we are in 2021 and as a major city, we have not grappled with that yet. So there is a lot. And one of the questions that Ron asked in that meeting is, why are we recreating the wheel? Hasn't this already been looked at and been studied? And he's absolutely right. So with that being said, they are going to hopefully look at the study that comes out from the universities that are going to give them hopefully a roadmap. Hopefully they will follow that roadmap. Hopefully the council will put something in place that, mandates them to follow that. And we definitely have to follow back up and see what MPD is going to do in the interim. I don't think we have a good answer for that. And we can use, hopefully leverage the conversation with Councilmember White, who seems really interested in this, with the other council members who are definitely interested in seeing more, done on this scenario, to kind of get something a little bit more concrete into place. And it really kind of plays into, I know Matt was talking about the gun violence issue, the different responses we have. And one of the things that a lot of the communities are concerned with when you have things like this is, when you have disparities in, stops and treatment among certain communities, when you have a surge of police force and activity in communities, those disparities are exacerbated. And the data is long-standing, a lot of those surges. So we saw that in stop and frisk in New York. We see that with MPD stats. A lot of the stops don't necessarily produce what they're looking for. So it's really important to answer this question finally, and for MPD to act on it. And, I think, the data tells us one thing, MPD doesn't necessarily agree that's the best way to look at it. And then we have to listen to the community that's been living, with these issues for a long time. So that in and of itself tells us what's really going on out there. And I think we have to listen to that. So with that being said, there's a couple groups that I am reaching out to. I've got some feedback from folks in the community. Definitely ACLU is one of them, because we want to see what they've done in the past with this particular issue, if there's anything that we're missing. And I've reached out to a couple other community groups. I'm hoping to get also a meeting with the Police Reform Commission, particularly Christy Lopez, who's a co-chair, whose name was mentioned a lot by MPD in terms of this study with Howard and Georgetown. So to see what her thoughts are on this, and to see why the Police Reform Commission chose to use that population data. Now, in looking at, what some of the other departments have done across the country, there are departments that have absolutely used census population data. And it seemed like that might have been the predominant use of the data initially when this was kind of coming up and people were looking at it. And since then, you definitely see departments undergoing research and figuring out other ways to measure it. A lot of the research that I saw on it had to deal with traffic stops, which I think are a little different and a little bit more nuanced and maybe better, able to measure. I'm not so sure about that. But I think it will be really interesting for us to hear from Christy with her background, and I'm sure very, very aware of the current and previous research into this area, to really understand everything that went into why they still chose to put it in there. I kind of think maybe they chose to put it in there because it has been used by departments in the past. And to answer that question, that's the only thing they have. MPD is not keeping any other data that answers that question. So in order for them to answer it, doesn't seem like a far stretch for them to use that census data. So that's where we are. We did not meet. We were supposed to meet this last week or this week. I can't even remember. It's been so much going on.
Last week.
Yeah, last week. So I'm not sure if we're going to meet in August or not. With the ANC being in recess, we might, to answer some questions and to hear from folks and hopefully get as many people that we can have in attendance. But I think our next step on this policing issue is to kind of get some of those meetings underway with some of the experts out there to understand the research issue. And then in addition to that, one of the things that we really need to tackle is to get our mission statement approved and blessed by the committee and then on to the ANC, and start working on the recommendations from the task force on racism. So we really have to, start tackling some of those recommendations and get those underway.
Okay, any questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay, John?
If I heard you right, Lisa, one of your comments was with some of these stops, the police are not getting what they're looking for. Did I hear you right?
Yes.
So the question is, what are they looking for?
Well, there is
And if they're making mistakes and not getting it's not working up. What's the motivation? What's behind? What are they looking for?
I think there have been some, and one of our members of the Racial and Social Equity Committee actually brought this up, where they specifically asked about marijuana stops, where they specifically wanted to know, were these stops had anything basically to do with marijuana, especially since marijuana stops have been, or marijuana in a certain quantity has been legalized. So you name the gamut. I mean, sometimes, they're out there maybe looking for weapons. Maybe sometimes they're, looking for drugs. Who knows? But I think a large percentage of the stops don't lead to anything further. So maybe they're not leading to arrest or conviction or, anything further in the judicial system. There is a recent information where, and I can't remember what organization publicized this. I'll go back and look for it. I think I sent it to you guys, where they were talking about the percentage of stops related to marijuana where it was used as a pretext for the actual stop, even though small percentages of marijuana usage has been legalized. It's still, in terms of the numbers in relation to the reason why the person is being stopped, is actually increased prior to it not being legalized. So that kind of says, well, maybe they're out there and if they see a car or a person and they're smoking marijuana and they're stopping and they're looking for something additional, and it's not necessarily leading to that. It's and then the person is, potentially has marijuana that's not illegal based on the amount that they're carrying. Right. So the concern is, are these stops pretextual in any way? And when they're not leading, if you're stopping a bunch of people and you're not making arrests, at the very least, you're wasting time. You're wasting time in a city that has a huge crime problem. So, just on the business side, it doesn't really make for a good business case. But that's the question I think, we're trying to really, really, really get at is, are these pretextual stops? And if they don't lead to anything and they kind of, have a same majority of a population, it kind of looks that way.
Okay, Connie?
I just have one question, Lisa. During that very long meeting, we were promised some of those questions will be addressed. Are they going to, do we need to send them something formal for them to address some of those questions about like, I asked the question about like, who are they stopping? Do they know if they live here so that it would matter if there's only 7% here, but they're stopping a lot more people of color, but are they people of color coming in from a different part of the district or from Maryland and so forth? Are they going to provide that to us?
I think that's, personally, I think that's best for our follow-up. I think there's a lot of stuff that we kind of need to really understand a lot better, and particularly the police commission's thoughts, discussions, and their rationale for including that data in there and using the population data. So I'm really thinking, and especially now that Councilmember White wants a separate meeting, my thought is to kind of get all that solidified and make sure we really understand, especially from the police commission's perspective and Christy Lopez's perspective, because they kind of gave us her background. She's a professor at Georgetown and has a lot of history on this subject, to kind of reformulate and have a second meeting. And it might even be a third because Councilmember White wants to have a meeting. So I think we should probably, at that point, once we're ready for that, then we probably could send them something formal when we request that additional meeting with those additional questions that they promised to answer for us. There is one thing that you had asked prior to that didn't have anything to do with the data, but it was for MPD to respond why they felt they could not use the census data. I think we could follow up with that a lot sooner, because that's just basically their opinion. They told us that they didn't think it was the best reason. And we said, well, why shouldn't these statistics alarm us? Why don't you want to use, the census data? And they did promise to get that to us in writing. So
I think the woman Kelly, because I was driving, so I didn't know who was who. I think Kelly said that that Police Reform Commission report should have had that footnote, and it was taken out for space considerations or something like that, and that she's going to try to get it back in there. So that explanation should come, I think, she probably has that explanation, but we wanted it in writing so that we can follow up.
Right. And I don't think it's not going to be back in a Police Reform Commission report. I don't know where she was saying they're going to put it, because she hasn't. I don't think the police, they've already issued their report. I don't see them doing an addendum to add her footnote. But if they took it out and there was a footnote in there, just send us the footnote.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping that they do. Yeah. So we could read it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, thank you, Lisa, for the report. Any other questions or comments? Okay,
does anyone who's remaining on, do they have anything that they want to ask? Although the attendees, the 12 attendees who are still with us?
No hands raised.
Okay.
All right, the last item, substantive item on the agenda is just a very brief report, and particularly because it's late with Connie especially, on the possible venues and formats for future ANC meetings. Just an update, the council did pass emergency legislation on July 13th that permits the ANC to continue to hold virtual meetings until February 5th, 2022. And at our last meeting, we discussed the need to explore other places to hold ANC meetings so that we could hold hybrid meetings. And we're going to have to work out the process for doing that, but we now have about 6 months to do it. And we've identified at least 4 criteria. First, that it has to be large enough to accommodate 100 or more attendees for some of our meetings. Second, it has to have good internet connections. Third, it has to have adequate parking. Fourth, the availability on the second and fourth Mondays of each month for the required time. In other words, past 9 o'clock. And I did have a fifth too, that there is no conflict of interest. And that would rule out, for instance, some of the businesses on the avenue, for instance, that would come to us for possible liquor license. So we identified a number of possible sites and that we divided up between Commissioner Goslin, Commissioner Zeldin, and myself to check those sites and possibly others to see whether they be suitable for ANC meetings. And so we're in the process of doing that now, but we do have a period of time to work on that. Peter?
I'd add to that list that we need good acoustics, because if we're going to end up doing hybrid meetings, we either need to build acoustics around us and around the microphone so that people online can understand. That's going to be crucial, and that's the real reason to leave the community center. So, anyways,
well, we do have an audio system that we purchased that we used in the community center, and it improved the acoustics dramatically. And so that is something that we can rely on in the future.
But a hybrid, I mean, I found the acoustics in the community center as a hearing aid wearer terrible to begin with. If you take that sound and you put it over, you stream that, it's gonna be ugly. I mean, nobody's gonna know who anybody's talking about.
All of those things, we got lots of things to work out. There's no question about that.
Okay.
And the community center may or may not be able to accommodate us, probably with some difficulty. So anyway, that's the timeline is now work it out over the next 6 months, essentially. So we're gonna have to start focusing on that. Okay, any comments or questions about that? All right, commission business. Peter, you have minutes for the June 28th and the July 12th meetings.
They're done. I've incorporated Commissioner Chang's announcements. I've left space for Commissioner Gore. I plead with my fellow commissioners to send me the announcements in written form. It's hard enough to listen to that tape after we've already we actually go through it in reality.
I know.
Take time and take notes.
I feel for you.
Can I just say, Lisa, I don't think anything you said on June 28th in the announcement portion was earth-shattering and needs to be seen.
I'll go back and look at it though, because it slipped me.
Yeah, okay. So with the caveat that I may add a couple of commissioners' comments and correct any more typos anybody finds, I move that we approve the minutes for June 28th and July 12th.
All those in favor? 5-0. Okay, John, you indicated there aren't any checks, but you have some announcement to make.
One announcement is that the waiver for $100 has been approved in one of our penalties. So game over.
Good job.
We'll stop there. But okay. I think there might be a Verizon bill coming forth. I'll bird dog that, Randy, and let you know.
Okay. All right. And in that vein, we need to authorize the treasurer and the chair to cut any checks that are necessary between now and our September 13th meeting, so that we don't have to hold a specific meeting in August just to approve a check that needs to be completed. So I would move that we authorize the chair and the treasurer to cut any checks that are necessary between now and our September 13th meeting. All those in favor? 5-0. Okay. Possible items for the September 13th meeting. Again, we'll be talking about the small area plan and the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee. We also have discussion. I'm hopeful that Director Lott is going to be with us then. I've talked to him specifically about this and to talk about the intersection at Chevy Chase Parkway and Military Road and anything else that we want to talk to the Director of DDOT about. That's the only thing I've got on the agenda right now, although I'm sure many other things will come up between now and then. Peter?
I want to recommend that commissioners go back and listen to the tape on June 28th of our conversation with Cesar Enriquez. I mean, separate and distinct from the specifics of a contract with Mr. Finkelman or whatever, it sounds like a complete, the programming for these centers that are so crucial to our community sounds like a complete soup. I mean, we spent half that conversation talking about contracts and the other half of the conversation talking about how DPR doesn't want to do contracts and wants to do permits. So who knows what they want to do? You know, I mean, so I think getting.
We've asked for them to give us that in writing, and they have not done so. So we need to continue to push them. And if they won't give it to us, we've asked actually for the director to come.
Well, how about asking again on that one first?
We'll do that again. We'll do that again.
Yeah, I think we have to. It's ridiculous.
You know, what Connie said in that session was really right on, which is that they created this problem. I mean, if they let anybody know, you know, they were studying it for an entire pandemic and they didn't let anybody know, and then at the last minute. So that's number one. And the other thing I want to do is I know I'm a pain in the ass about this, but how about August 30th having at least an administrative meeting? If we don't go into September with some plan about how we're going to make this work, we're going to end.
Peter, come up with the plan and something that we can look at. Okay.
If I come up with a proposal, will we meet on August 30th?
If there's a need for us to meet, we'll meet. We'll have an administrative meeting.
You know I can draft paper.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So Randy, here's one more thing. It's like 1:40 in the morning for me. I'm getting tired, and I have to hike a glacier tomorrow. So wish me luck. I have to get on a bus by 8, my time. So my question is about the Chevy Chase Rescue Squad. You know, they have their board meeting June 28th. It's 2 days from now. Do we want to write a letter asking them to
I do not.
have a public comment? You don't want to do that.
I do not.
You don't either, Lisa. Okay, I just wanted to bring that up.
And I just point out I received at my house
I'm concerned.
a solicitation for money from the Chevy Chase Rescue Squad.
Okay, that's interesting.
No,
Oh, wow.
last Friday.
Okay.
So I mean, we've got to tell them if they're not going to service us, they got to stop taking money from us.
Which they said they were. They said they were.
Well, I mean, you know, I didn't pull.
Okay, well, we've run out of time for that.
Yeah, I don't think we should do that. That's a decision that they need to make, and you know, we can't advise them. We don't have any authority to advise them.
Yes, that's true. Okay, all right.
That was my thoughts too, Connie. I just think,
I
think this is a political situation. We might not want to get in between these two agencies.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, that's what I want. Thank you. I just wanted to bring that up. So I'm not going to have a chance to talk to both of you.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
All right.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for all those who stayed to the bitter end. And we appreciate it. Well,
Connie, don't fall off that glacier.
I can't. I don't want to.
I'll send you contacts.
Yeah, I mean, I got my daughter.
They've got very good crampons for you, or whatever those shoes are called.
Right, I know.
It works very well. I've been on lots of glaciers.
Oh, good. Thankfully, my daughter will be here. She'll help me. So,
Exactly.
all right, everyone. Okay.
All right. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Night, y'all.